How many of you have noticed that there's a lot of imitation out there in our world? We have cubic zirconians instead of diamonds, right? We have imitation crab meat instead of real crab meat, right? We've got Elvis impersonators out the wazoo, right? And not the real Elvis. We have celebrity lookalikes. We have all kinds of imitation name brand items of purses and sunglasses and all this kind of stuff. Imitations that you can purchase, right? The interesting thing about imitation is sometimes they're so good that that they can fool you into thinking that they're the real deal. Tourists go to places like Tijuana to buy Ray-Ban sunglasses, right? For pennies on the dollar, right? But if you know anything about Tijuana, you know they're not getting Ray-Ban, right? Somebody wrote Ray-Ban on the side of the sunglasses and sold it to them, right? It wasn't Ray-Ban, the real Ray-Bans. I was working in Mexico at an orphanage, and one of the things we would do is we would take the young people, the groups that would come, the youth groups that would come, and we would take them into Tijuana so they could do some shopping sometimes. And I remember this one youth pastor, man, he was so excited because he got his Ray-Bans and they were super cheap. And I'm going, I don't think that's real. Those are fake, but I just got to let it go. But man, he was so excited. He got his Ray-Bans for like $20 and they're really like, normally real Ray-Bans are like a lot more than like $60, even $100. But it looks like the real thing. Sometimes imitations can be so good that the only way to tell that they are imitation is to do specialized tests on them. In fact, that's why museums, before they purchase a painting, they always do specialized tests on it, right? Because they want to make sure it's the genuine article. Because nobody wants a fake, right? Nobody wants to spend all that money and find out they bought a fake, right? Nobody goes to the store and buys a $200 Gucci purse, right? And finds out if it's a fake and says, "Oh, hey, it's still as good as the original," right? They don't do that, right? When you spend all that money, you want the real deal. You don't want a fake. Well, here's the thing. God is the same way with us. You see, God's not interested in fake Christians. He wants the real deal. He doesn't want imitation. He wants the real deal. He wants the genuine article. He doesn't just want people who look like Christians or seem like Christians or talk like Christians. He wants genuine Christians. So what God does is He regularly tests us to see if we're genuine or not. Did you know that? These tests usually consist of very difficult circumstances or challenges in our life that challenge our faith and challenge our loyalty. Are we the real deal? You see, it's easy to say I'm a Christian, right? I'm a Christian who loves and obeys God when everything's easy, when everything's going our way. It's easy to say that, right? Man, I love God. Man, I'm a Christian. Oh, everything's great. But it's when things get tough, when things get challenging, or when a situation comes up where God commands you to do something that you don't want to do, or make a sacrifice that you don't want to make, suddenly you're in a test. Are you genuine? Do you really love God? Are you faithful? You see, the truth is, if you obey and love God through a situation like that, then that proves you're genuine. when you're willing to sacrifice something that you don't want to sacrifice because God told you to, that shows you're genuine. That proves you genuinely love and obey God. Well, today I want to share with you a story of a man who was tested like this in the Bible. And he passed the test. And I want to show you from his examples 3 things that we need to do if we're going to pass our tests of faith and loyalty from God. The story is from Genesis chapter 22, 1 through 19. And it's the story of Abraham. The story of Abraham and Isaac. And I'm not going to tell you about it. I'm just going to read it, okay? Genesis chapter 22, 1 through 19. I'm just going to read the first part. And this is what it says. This is the test that God put Abraham to. He says, sometime later, God tested Abraham's faith. Abraham, God called. Yes, he replied. Here I am. Take your son, your only son, yes, Isaac, whom you love so much, and go to the land of Moriah. Go and sacrifice him as a burnt offering on one of the mountains which I will show you. Talk about a test. Talk about a test of loyalty. Talk about a test of whether he truly serves God. Whether he truly trusts God. Whether he's willing to be obedient. God told Abraham to do something unthinkable. This was his son, his only son. This was the son that he had waited his whole life for. God had promised him many, many, many years ago, I'm going to give you a son, and I'm going to make him into this vast nation. And this was that son. God had finally given him to him. And now God was saying, I want you to go sacrifice him. This was the ultimate test of faith and loyalty for Abraham. Would he give up what he loves the most for God? You and I are going to have our own tests. You might ask, how do you know that, Pastor? Because the Bible is full of examples of God testing his people. Because God doesn't want fair weather fans. He wants the real deal. He wants followers who love and obey him even when things are hard and difficult. So let me share with you 3 things from Abraham's example that you and I need to do if we're going to pass our tests. And the first thing we need to do when we face a situation where we're tested, our loyalty, our faith is tested, is to trust God's character. Abraham had a difficult decision to make. Do I obey God and kill my son or not? How do you make that decision? How do you respond to that kind of command from God? I love how Abraham responds. It's in the next verse. This is what it says. It says, the next morning, this is right after God commanded him. It says, the next morning Abraham got up early. He saddled his donkey. He took 2 of his servants with him along with his son Isaac. Then he chopped wood for a fire for a burnt offering and set out for the place that God told him about. No, I mean, it's as if Abraham says, all right, I'm on it. I'm ready to go. He's all in. He's ready. Now, I'm not going to tell you that he didn't doubt. I'm not going to tell you that he didn't wrestle with this, because I'm thinking he probably did. But regardless of how he wrestled with this, there came a point where he was like, I'm in. I'm all in. I trust you, God. I trust you. How do we continue to obey and follow God when everything is falling apart? When God tells us to do something that we don't want to do. Or when we're obeying means giving up something that we genuinely love. How do we do that? The answer is we do what Abraham did, and we put our trust in God. We put our trust in God's character. We fall back on what we know of God, what we know, what we know he is, who he is, his character. You see, Abraham knew God to be a good God, a God who loved him and always took care of him, always took care of his family. From years back, God kept providing for them. God kept delivering him, protecting him. God always showed himself to be a God that could be trusted. And so when God tells him to do this, Abraham has a choice to make. He says what he needs to do is he goes, I'm going to trust that this God that I know, I'm going to put my trust in him because he's always shown me to be a God that I can trust. A God who cares about me, who cares about my family, who has what's best in mind for me. When you and I are faced with our own difficult circumstances and choices, we need to do the same thing Abraham did. We need to trust God's character. But to do that, you have to know God. And this is where we get into trouble. Because you have to have built a relationship with God. See, Abraham had this long history of this long, intimate, deep relationship with God. And that's why he was able to wake up early and go, okay, I'm on it. We're going to do exactly what God said. Why? Because I know he's a good God. And he's got me. He's got my back. I can trust him. But for so many of us, we struggle in just having that relationship with God. We struggle in prayer. We struggle having a time of prayer, a regular time of prayer. We struggle with just reading the Bible on a regular basis, all of which develop our relationship with God. One day we're going to face some very difficult circumstances and choices, and we're going to come up short because we don't have enough of a relationship where we can trust him. We can say, okay, I know this God that I serve. He is such an awesome God. I know that I can trust him. I know it. We have to change that. We need to spend regular time listening, praying, talking to God. We need to study his word, learning about who God is. What is he like? It's only after that you learn God's character that you can put your trust in him. You've got to develop that relationship. The second thing you need to do when you're in a situation where your faith and loyalty are being tested is you need to be willing to do what is right no matter the cost. You do what's right no matter the cost. Listen to this in verse 2 through 3. Take your son, your only son, yes, Isaac, whom you love so much, and go to the land of Moriah. Go and sacrifice him as a burnt offering on one of the mountains, which I will show you. The next morning, Abraham got up early. He saddled his donkey and took 2 of his servants with him, along with his son Isaac. Abraham was commanded to sacrifice his son. To obey would have cost him his most precious possession. Yet despite that, he obeyed. There are going to be times when in your life where your loyalty is going to be questioned. Your loyalty is going to be tested. Maybe it's with a boss who tells you to lie for him. And you know that if you don't, it could mean your job. But if you do, you know you violated something that God says don't do. You violated his commands. Maybe it's a tax form that you're filling out that needs a few extra deductions because you're like, man, I can't afford to pay this much. And if I just write in a few extra deductions, I'll be okay. But you know if you do, you're lying. And again, you violated the commands of God. There are always going to be these times where God's going to put you to the test and say, are you the real deal? You say you love me. You say you'll follow me. You say you'll do whatever I tell you to do. But when you're put to the test, will you do it? Will you pay the price that comes with obedience? I love the story. How many of you have ever seen that movie, the movie Courageous? I love this movie. I love the part where it's Javier. If you didn't say it, I'm just going to kind of briefly summarize for you. In this movie, there's this guy. He's Javier. He's a young guy. He's got a family, and he's been working these jobs that are very temporary, construction jobs, and having just a lot of trouble, having consistent income, and at a certain point, he gets this job working in this factory, and it's perfect. His family's happy. They've got money now. Everything's working, and he's doing really well. The bosses love him. In fact, the boss calls him in and says, listen, I'm looking to hire a manager or promote somebody within to become a manager of this plant. And your name came up. But I need to know that you're on my team. And so here's what I need you to do. I'm going to give you a shot. I'm going to give you we're going to do a test run. I'm going to put you in charge of this crew during this time. And here's what's going to happen. We're going to have some crates are going to come in, about 14 of them. And when you receive those crates, I want you to set 3 of them aside in this room. I'll tell you about later, we'll point out to you. But on the shipping form, I want you to write in that you only really received 11 crates, not 14. That's all he says to him. And he says, are you on my team? Now, Javier had committed to being a Christian and to be an example for his sons, his children, his wife and family. And so he was put on the spot. He was put in the hot seat. And he was hesitated. And so the boss says, listen, I will give you one day to figure out what you want to do. And so Javier goes home and he tells his wife, and his wife's freaking out. She says, just do it. Just do it. We can't go backwards. We can't go back to that old life where we never have a steady paycheck. We just can't do that. And Javier's like, no, I can't violate God's laws. I can't do that. I committed to following him. I won't do that. He comes back to the office of his boss, and he tells him, says, I can't do that, sir. With all due respect, I cannot do that. Now come to find out, it was all a test. The boss was just putting him to a test to see if he was honest. And he says, Javier, you're the only one who passed this test. The only one. And he promoted him. Now here's the truth of the matter. Not every test that we go through is going to have a happy ending like that. You may have to pay that price. Because Javier was concerned, am I going to lose my job? Am I going to lose everything? And here's the thing. When you come into those situations, the compromise it seems like, man, that's the only way to go, right? It's the only option. Because, man, if I don't compromise, I'm going to lose everything. I'm not going to have anything. I can't do that. This is the only option. But we have to determine in our hearts, no, I serve God, the God in heaven, who can do anything, who can do miracles, and he can provide me with another job. He can raise the dead. It doesn't matter. See, that's what Abraham realized. He was willing to sacrifice his son because he knew God can raise the dead. And if I sacrifice him now, God can bring him back later. But you and I, we have to come to this place where we're willing to pay the cost, to obey God no matter the cost. No matter what the cost may be, we say, God, I'm all in. I'm ready to do it. I'm ready to follow you. I'm ready to obey you, whatever it is. And the truth is, we need to make that decision now, not wait until we're faced with it. You need to think right now for yourself. Think of the thing you love the most. Maybe it's a person. Maybe it's something that you own. Think about this. Think about if God told you to give it up, would you do it? If God said, I want you to put that thing or that person on an altar and sacrifice it for me, would you do that? Are you willing to be obedient? I told you about the car. There's a minister that decided, I'm willing to sacrifice my car because God said so. Do you think God's going to bless him? But let me ask you this. What if God told you to do that? What if God said, I want you to give away your car? I want you to do this. I want you to give this up. Are you willing to do it? Are you willing to pay the price and be obedient? And trust that God, He's got your back. He will provide what you need. He'll take care of you. You need to come to the place where you can say, you know what, if it costs me my job, I'll do what's right. If it costs me my friends, I will do the right thing. If it costs me my reputation, I will do the right thing. There is nothing that I will withhold from God. Is that you? Like I said, it's easy to say you're a Christian when things are going well. What about when things get tough? What about when God calls you to do something that you honestly don't want to do? You'd rather not. I don't really want to go through that, God. Are you willing to do it? Are you imitation or are you the real deal? Listen to what Jesus says in Luke 6:46 through 49. He says this, so why do you keep calling me Lord, Lord, when you don't do what I say? Isn't that powerful? Why do you keep calling me Lord, Lord, when you don't do what I say? I will show you what it's like when someone comes to me, listens to my teaching, and then follows it. It is like a person building a house who digs deep and lays the foundation on solid rock. When the flood waters rise and break against the house, it stands firm because it is well built. But anyone who hears and doesn't obey is like a person who builds a house without a foundation. When the floods sweep down against that house, it will collapse into a heap of ruins. Jesus is saying anyone who doesn't build their house on a foundation of obedience and righteousness will have their life fall apart around them when the difficult times come. You see, we often look at compromise, this is the only option. This is the only sane thing to do is just compromise, right? Just do this. Just lie for your boss, Just do it. Just make things easy, right? But what Jesus is saying, it may seem good in the moment, but eventually your life is going to fall apart. Doing what's right may seem costly, but in the end, God will be there to establish you. The third thing you need to do when you're in a situation where your faith and loyalty are being tested is believe God's promises. I'm going to continue the story. It says this, on the third day of their journey, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. Stay here with the donkey, Abraham told the servants. The boy and I will travel a little farther. We will worship there and then we will come right back. So Abraham placed the wood for the burnt offering on Isaac's shoulders, while he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the two of them walked on together, Isaac turned to Abraham and said, "Father?" "Yes, my son," Abraham replied. "We have the fire and the wood," the boy said. "But where is the sheep for the burnt offering?" I love Abraham's response. "God will provide a sheep for the burnt offering, my son," Abraham answered. And they both walked on together. Isn't it interesting that Abraham knew in advance that God would provide the lamb for the sacrifice? Not only that, in verse 5 it says, he tells the servants, "Hey, me and my son will be back. We're coming back. We're just going to worship a little while, and then we're going to be right back." He knew. He knew in advance that this isn't going to end the way it seems like it's going to end. Right? How did he know these things? He knew because he knew God had made promises to him about Isaac that had not yet been fulfilled. Those promises had not yet been fulfilled. And since they had not yet been fulfilled, God knew God is going to do something. He may prevent me from killing him, or he may raise him from the dead, but this is not going to end the way it seems like it's going to end. Listen, you and I, we need to learn God's promises. There are going to be times in your life where you need something to hang on to. And all you have to hang on to are God's promises. And if you don't know those promises, you will have nothing to hold on to. Let me give you a couple examples of some promises from the Bible. Matthew 6:31-33 says this: "So don't worry about these things, saying, 'What will we eat? What will we drink? What will we wear?' These things dominate the thoughts of unbelievers, but your heavenly Father already knows all your needs. Seek the kingdom of God above all else and live righteously, and He will give you everything you need." That's a promise. So many people are going through financial difficulties, hardship these days. How many are needlessly worried because they don't know or understand this promise, or they don't believe this promise? How many are stressed out because they think it's all up to me? I've got to provide for myself. I've got to look out for myself. And God's saying, no, listen, don't worry about what you need. Just focus on doing what's right and putting me and my interests first in your life, and I will take care of you. I will provide for you. Here's another promise. Hebrews chapter 13, verse 5 says this: "For God has said, I will never fail you. I will never abandon you." That's a powerful promise. God says, when things are their darkest, when everyone else has deserted you, I will never desert you. I will never abandon you. Did you know that Jesus himself stood on this promise in his darkest hour when everyone else had deserted him? Listen to what he says to his disciples in John 16:32. It says this: "Listen to me, a time is coming when you will be scattered, each to his own home. That time is now here. You will leave me alone, but I am never really alone, because the Father is with me." Jesus, in his darkest hour, when everyone deserted him, he knew he is never alone. No matter what he faced, no matter what he went through. Because God had promised never to leave him, never to abandon him. There are going to be times in your life when you're going to need something to hang on to. And we need to know and believe God's promises. I don't know how many times I've had to stand on the promises of God. Things look dark. I always, when I pray, when I'm going through something like that, I'm like, God, the waves are tall right now. Because I'm kind of relating it to like when Peter was walking on the water and the waves started getting high and he's like, whoa, and he started sinking. I'm like, God, the waves are getting tall. Help, please. But I'll tell you something. In those times, I don't know how many times I've stood on the promises of God and said, you know what? I know you're with me. I know you promised this. So I know it's going to work out. I trust you. I trust you, God. You're going to need those promises when you go through those times of testing. When your loyalty is tested, your faith is tested. Do you know the promises of God? Do you know what He's already written in His Word and said, listen, I will do this for you. I will do this for you. Just trust me. I want to finish the story because I want you to see how God fulfills His promises to Abraham. It says this, when they arrived at the place where God had told him to go, Abraham built an altar and arranged the wood on it. Then he tied his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. And Abraham picked up the knife to kill his son as a sacrifice. At that moment, the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham. Yes, Abraham replied, here I am. Don't lay a hand on the boy, the angel said. Do not hurt him in any way, for now I know that you truly fear God. You have not withheld from me even your son, your only son. Then Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught by its horns in a thicket. So he took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering in place of his son. Abraham named the place Yahweh-Yireh, which means the Lord will provide. To this day, people still use that name as a proverb. On the mountain of the Lord, it will be provided. Then the angel of the Lord called again to Abraham from heaven. This is what the Lord says. Because you have obeyed me and have not withheld even your son, your only son, I swear by my own name that I will certainly bless you. I will multiply your descendants beyond number, like the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will conquer the cities of their enemies. And through your descendants, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. All because you have obeyed me. Then they returned to the servants and traveled back to Beersheba, where Abraham continued to live. Isn't that amazing? God turned things around. Everything Abraham stood on, every promise, every belief, God came through. He told his servants, God will provide the lamb for the sacrifice. Or he told his son, God will provide the lamb for the sacrifice. And that's exactly what God did. He told his servants that me and my son, we will be back. We're going to worship for a little while and then we're coming back. And that's exactly what happened. Because they stood on God's promises. Because he stood on God's promises. Listen, each of us are going to face those times when our faith and obedience are going to be tested by God. Because God doesn't want imitation Christians. He wants the real deal. He wants to know, are you the real deal? Are you the genuine article? And when you face those times, remember these three things. Put your trust in God's character. Do what's right no matter what the cost. And trust in God's promises. When you do that, you're going to pass the test. You're going to show yourself genuine.